99.5%. That right there is the number an investigative reporter from the New York Times arrived at after spending a full year digging through hundreds of pages of old documents, flying all the way to Central America, and stacking out a room. He says he is 99.5% sure he has found the guy. Who? Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin. The ghost who materialized on the internet in 2008, vanished into thin air in April 2011, and hasn't been seen by a single soul for 17 straight years. Think about that. 17 years. Over this time, journalists, scholars, internet sleuths, and documentary crews like HBO have launched dozens of crusades to find him. Every single wave confidently declared, "We finally found him," and every single wave ended up with egg on their face. The name Satoshi Nakamoto has become, without a doubt, the greatest unsolved mystery of the internet age. And then comes this reporter, John Carreyrou, sitting in a live studio. The host asks him, "Just how sure are you?" Carreyrou looks up, pauses for a bit, and drops that number, somewhere between 99.5% and 100%. He says it casually, but let that sink in. He is essentially 100% convinced that the man he found is Satoshi. You can treat today's video as a bedtime story. I personally found the whole saga so fascinating that I mapped out the entire process to share with you all. How John step-by-step tracked down this absolute legend. If you are interested, highly recommend checking out the original New York Times podcast. It's fantastic, and I will drop the link in the description. To understand why this is such massive news, we first need to talk about Bitcoin. People are incredibly polarized about it. Some worship it, while others dismiss it as a modern-day tulip mania. But there's one fact you simply cannot ignore. At its peak, this was a $2.4 trillion industry. To put that into perspective, that number is larger than the entire GDP of Shanghai last year. It's the equivalent of a mega city's entire output: food, housing, foreign trade, finance, manufacturing, all rolled into one. And it was conjured out of thin air 17 years ago by one person, starting with a 9-page PDF. But it just gets crazier. In the very early days of Bitcoin, this Satoshi Nakamoto quietly mined about 1.1 million Bitcoins, and he just left them in a single wallet. He hasn't touched a single one. At today's prices, around $70,000 per coin as of this April, that stash is worth roughly $78 billion. If you value those coins at the current market state, Satoshi's net worth easily places him in the top 25 of the Forbes Real-Time Billionaires list. Just picture this, one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet, and nobody knows what he looks like, where he lives, if it's a man or a woman, or even if it's a single person or a group. He has drifted through the internet like a phantom for 17 years, until this reporter said, "I found him." Let's talk about the name first. Satoshi Nakamoto. Sounds like a Japanese, right? Many people naturally assume the founder was Japanese. But what does he look like? What's his nationality? How old is he? Nobody knows. There isn't a single photograph of him on the entire internet. Let's rewind to the end of 2008. That autumn, the world watched the Lehman Brothers collapse as the subprime mortgage crisis hit Wall Street like a tsunami. Right in the middle of that chaos, someone using the name Satoshi Nakamoto dropped a 9-page PDF onto an obscure cryptography mailing list. The title is Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Sounds like a boring college thesis, right? In reality, it was a nuclear bomb dropped on financial history. In those 9 pages, he solved a problem people thought was impossible. How to let two strangers send money to each other over the internet without a bank, without a government, and without any middleman. And not just sending data, it's sending actual hard value. After dropping that white paper, Satoshi stuck around. For 2.5 years, he worked with a tiny group of early adopters, tweaking the code line by line, getting the system running. Then, in April 2011, he sent an email to one last friend saying, "I'll move on to other things." And just like that, he evaporated. No one ever received any message from him, no one ever saw him post another word. This brings us to the main character of our story, the reporter who is 99.5% sure he found Satoshi is John Carreyrou. Let me give you his background first, so you don't think this is just some random beat reporter blowing smoke. Carreyrou is an absolute heavyweight in the journalism world. He is the guy who single-handedly took down the massive Silicon Valley blood testing scam, Theranos. His book, Bad Blood, reads like a spy thriller. It is exceptionally good. You might remember this story. A blonde Stanford dropout named Elizabeth Holmes starts a company called Theranos, claiming she invented a miracle machine. By pricking your finger, squeeze out one drop of blood, and the machine could test for hundreds of diseases. Everyone bought it. Silicon Valley titans poured in money. The media dubbed her the female Steve Jobs. She was on the cover of Forbes, staring right through you with those huge unblinking eyes. Her company was valued at $9 billion. She even wore the signature Steve Jobs black turtleneck. But John Carreyrou started tracking down ex-employees and digging through internal documents. He blew the lid off the whole thing. The machine was a completely fake. The company was the fraud of the century. Then the FBI stepped in, the company collapsed, the Holmes was sentenced to 11 years in prison. So you understand now, John is not an amateur puzzle solver. He is a professional lie detector. He's looked more liars in the eye than most of us have seen good people. And it was exactly this instinct that made him sit bolt upright on his couch on an autumn evening in 2024. John was stuck in traffic on the Long Island Expressway after work. His wife, annoyed by the jazz station he was playing, switched over to a podcast. The hosts were discussing a newly released HBO documentary that claimed to have unmasked Satoshi. John couldn't sit still. He got home, didn't even take his shoes off, fired up HBO Max, and hit play. He wasn't buying the documentary's ultimate conclusion, that they pointed the finger at a young Canadian programmer. The evidence was incredibly weak. But halfway through the film, one specific scene pinned him to the couch. The director was sitting on a bench in Riga, Latvia, next to a British gentleman named Adam Back. Adam Back is a massive figure in the Bitcoin world. Not just a hype guy, but someone who actually pulls the strings behind the scenes. He controls a network of Bitcoin-related companies, a mini Bitcoin empire. In the scene, the director casually reads off a list of names of people who had been suspected of being Satoshi over the last decades. Reads the first name, Back looks normal. Reads the second name, still normal. Then, the director reads Adam Back's own name. Suddenly, Back's eyes start darting around. His left hand involuntarily starts picking at his knee. He shifts his weight backward, and in a rushed defensive tone, he says, "Look, I'd prefer not to be on camera for this. I'm not Satoshi, really. I hope you can understand." He repeats it multiple times. John, sitting on his couch, slowly leaned forward. He had spent his life behind an interview camera. He knew that look. He later told his colleague, "I have seen a lot of liars in my life, and that guy's body language, that was an absolute tell." So this is a poker term. A tell is an unconscious physical reaction that gives away a player's bluff. From that night on, the veteran investigative journalist sat at his desk and pulled up hundreds of pages of text left behind by Satoshi. He was going to pluck this British man out of a lineup of 2,000 suspects, word by word. John faced a massive headache. Satoshi was the ultimate ghost. He used anonymous proxy IPs, burner emails, never posted a photo. He even scrambled his posting times, sometimes 3 a.m., sometimes 2 p.m., so you couldn't pin down his time zone. There were only 3 things on the entire internet confirmed to be written by Satoshi: the 9-page white paper, a few hundred emails to early adopters, and some forum posts, a few hundred pages of English text in total. John started reading. It was a slog because he knew nothing about cryptography or coding. He had to look up formulas and jargon paragraph by paragraph. But as he read, he came up with a brilliantly simple, almost primitive strategy. He pulled out a little notebook and started writing down words. Specifically, the weird words Satoshi used. Odd phrasing, bizarre spelling of technical terms, sentence structures that even native English speakers rarely use. One by one, he filled the notebook until he had over 100 highly specific quirky terms. Then, John did something even more old school. He took the dozen or so people who had been historically suspected of being Satoshi, went to their Twitter accounts, and used the advanced search function to look for those 100 words. Search the first suspect, nothing. Second suspect, a couple of hits. Third suspect, barely anything. Then he searched Adam Beck's account. He froze. John later described it as adrenaline rush. Let me explain how crazy this is. Those 100 words included ultra-niche tech jargon, bizarre mixtures of British and American spelling. Adam Beck had used almost every single one of them on Twitter. Imagine John at his desk, just trying his luck, and the screen just keeps lighting up with matches like a slot machine. He later said he could hear his own heartbeat. But the veteran reporter quickly threw cold water on himself. Wait, he thought. This isn't proof. The cryptography circle is tiny. They all read the same papers, talk about the same topics, and use the same slang. It's not shocking that an insider would share vocabulary with Satoshi. It wasn't proof, but it was a massive lead. Now he had to figure out, where did Adam Beck come from? And why was he speaking exactly like Satoshi? To answer that, we have to rewind 30 years to a niche subculture. In the early 90s, the San Francisco Bay Area was home to a group of brilliant, eccentric nerds, math PhDs, hackers, programmers, and straight-up anarchists. They believed governments would eventually mutate into massive surveillance monsters, tracking every call, email, and bank transfer. Their only weapon against this monster was cryptography. If the math is solid and the encryption is unbreakable, no government can eavesdrop. They call themselves the cypherpunks. They were high-level keyboard warriors who didn't just complain about the government, they wrote the code to fight it. How did they communicate? No Slack, no Discord. They used a giant email mailing list. Anyone who wanted to talk sent an email, and it blasted out to all subscribers. Over a decade, hundreds of people generated hundreds of thousands of emails. Their ultimate obsession was something called electronic cash. Money that didn't need banks or governments, transferred directly online. For 10 years, genius after genius tried to build it and failed. They were waiting for a messiah. Adam Back was one of the most active, hardcore, elite members of this cypherpunk mailing list. As John spent months reading through hundreds of thousands of these ancient emails, he found something that made the hairs of his neck stand up. After the original list cooled down around 2001, everyone moved to a new cryptography mailing list. Adam Back was there, posting constantly for years. John mapped out Back's posting history and found a terrifyingly perfect void. Starting in 2008, Back just stopped posting. Not a slowdown, complete silence, for 2 entire years. The most active guy on the list went completely away from keyboard. He vanished. And just months after Back went silent, Satoshi Nakamoto appeared. Where did he appear? On that exact same mailing list. Satoshi dropped his 9-page white paper there, debated with early players, tweaked the code for over 2 years. Then, in April 2011, Satoshi sent his final email and disappeared forever. A few months later, Adam Back returned to the list, acted like nothing happened, started posting again. John stared at these 2 timelines overlapping perfectly. He later told his colleague that the first thought in his head was Batman and Bruce Wayne was never in the same room together. Even weirder, when Back returned, he didn't mention Bitcoin, not a single word. During the 2 years Satoshi was building it, Back was completely silent. Only after Satoshi vanished, for good did Back eventually start talking about Bitcoin publicly. Does that sound normal to you? A guy who spent 10 years obsessing over electronic cash sees a stranger drop the perfect version of his dream onto his favorite mailing list, and he doesn't say a single word about it. John then realized he needed to read Back's old posts from the 90s again. Let's keep the timeline straight. Satoshi published the Bitcoin white paper in October 2008. Adam Back's posts on the cypherpunk list were primarily written between 1997 and 1999, a full decade earlier. John lined up Back's posts with Satoshi's 9-page white paper. Listen to this and judge for yourself. Point 1. We need a peer-to-peer electronic cash without a bank acting as a middleman, where sender and receiver are anonymous. Written by Back in 1998, the core definition of Bitcoin in 2008. Point 2. This cash needs a public ledger that everyone can verify. Written by Back in 1998, the exact definition of the blockchain. Point 3. How do we issue new money? We use a hashcash mechanism, making computers solve a math problem. Whoever solves it first gets the new coin. Wait, let's pause on hashcash. Hashcash was literally invented by Adam Back in 1997. Originally, he designed it to fight email spam. Before sending an email, your computer had to solve a quick math puzzle. It took a few seconds, no big deal for a normal person, but it would completely fry the computer of a spammer trying to send 100,000 emails at once. Back invented it, wrote the paper, and posted it in 1997. 11 years later, Satoshi Nakamoto took Adam Back's exact hashcash mechanism and dropped it directly into Bitcoin. Today, we call it mining. Picture the scene. From 1997 to 1999, Adam Back sits at his keyboard forging the exact parts needed for an electronic currency, peer-to-peer, public ledger, hashcash mining. All the parts are on the table, but no one has assembled them. Let's fast forward to autumn 2008. Wall Street is bleeding out. A guy named Satoshi drops a white paper on the same forum, and every single part in that machine was forged by Adam Back 10 years earlier. The architect vanished from the stage, and the creator appeared out of a thin air. John knew he was onto something huge, but coincidences don't hold up in court. He needed a fingerprint. He turned to stylometry, the science of analyzing writing styles. Everyone has subconscious writing habits. Do you use start or begin? Do you put commas before but? A computer can read these patterns. It's been used to catch anonymous authors before. John hired a top French expert, Florian Carreyrou. He sent him all of Satoshi's writing and the writings of a dozen suspects. 6 agonizing weeks later, the expert replied, "The person whose writing style most closely matches Satoshi is Adam Back. However, the margin between him and the runner-up is too small. I cannot make a conclusive ruling. I suggest invalidating this analysis." John was crushed. The runner-up was Hal Finney, another legendary cypherpunk whose writing was nearly identical. But then, John remembered something. In the 90s, Adam Back actually wrote an article teaching people how to defeat stylometry. He literally wrote a guide on how to disguise your writing to fool algorithm. It was like a suspect publishing a manual on how to wipe fingerprints 10 years before a crime. John pivoted. He recruited a brilliant colleague, Dylan Friedman, a former programmer turned journalist who specialized in AI and data parsing. They downloaded every single post ever made by everyone on the cypherpunk mailing list over that last 10 plus years. All of it packed into a massive database. Now, instead of manually checking back against Satoshi, they could pit Satoshi against a pool of over 2,000 elite cryptographers at the push of a button. They ran 3 massive filters. Filter 1, they took the highly specific, obscure technical jargon Satoshi used, words with no synonyms. They ran them through the database of 2,000 people. The people who used them the most added back. Satoshi was terrified at using hyphens. He made over 300 highly specific formatting errors. If Satoshi took a grammar test, he would fail. John fed those 300 specific errors into the database. For Adam Back, 67 matches. Second place, 38 matches. Back doubled the runner-up. Out of hundreds of suspects, he was a total statistical anomaly. Filter 3, this was the kill shot. They took Satoshi's strangest writing tics and used them as an elimination game. /1, Satoshi put 2 spaces after a period instead of 1. /2, Satoshi used British spelling, like color instead of color. /3, Satoshi constantly confused its and its. /4, Satoshi had a weird habit of putting the word also at the very end of a sentence. For example, I like this, also. Finally, they were down to 8 names. Adam Back was still on the list. They needed one final filter to bring it to a single name. Satoshi had a split personality writing tic. He would switch spellings in the middle of a document. He would write email and then switch to email. He would write the British check and the American check. When John and Dylan applied this final split personality filter, 7 of the 8 names vanished. Only one name remained on the screen, Adam Back. John leaned back in his chair. It was like watching a guy walk around in different disguises for 17 years. You know he looks familiar, but you can't place him until you overlay his footprints from a decade ago with the footprints of the ghost, and they match perfectly. The paper trail was done. It was time for a face-to-face. John sent back multiple emails, or ignored, Obviously, why would a guy hiding for 17 years talk to the press? But John checked Beck's schedule. Beck was a regular on the Bitcoin conference circuit, and his next stop was in El Salvador. John booked a flight. This is a 50-something, highly successful, award-winning journalist flying to Central America just to ambush a guy in a hallway. You have to respect hustle. John arrived at the conference and stepped out the VIP speaker lounge. He stood outside for 30 minutes like a hawk. Finally, the door opened. Adam Back walked out with two colleagues. John stepped up behind him and tapped his shoulder. Back turned around. For a split second, John saw it again. That brief flash of panic. The look of a target realizing it's been cornered. But Beck is a pro. Within seconds, he buried it under a polite British smile. John introduced himself. I'm John from the New York Times. Can we talk? Beck hesitated, then did something unexpected. All right, let's go to my room. For 2 hours, John unloaded his entire arsenal. He laid out the 100 words, the perfectly overlapping timelines, the missing 2 years, the 10-year-old Hashcash blueprint, the 67 hyphen errors. With every point John made, Beck's face got a little redder. He leaned back, his body tense, his hands rubbing his knees. But every time, he replied in a calm, practiced voice. It doesn't prove anything. It's a coincidence. I am not Satoshi. He repeated that sentiment over and over. But one time, he phrased it in a very specific way. I have to say I am not Satoshi. This is my position. John's pen stopped. Listen to that phrasing. Saying, I am not Satoshi is stating a fact. Saying, my position is I am not Satoshi is lawyer speaker. It's a debate tactic. Someone who isn't Satoshi just says no. They don't declare their position. Beck realized his slip-up and quickly added, and it also happens to be the truth. But the words were already out. As the 2-hour interview was wrapping up, John threw out one last detail. Satoshi once said something, John noted. He said, I am better with code than I am with words. Before John could even explain why he brought this up, Beck cut in and, almost talking to himself, finished the thought in the first person. For someone who is not good with words, I sure talk a lot on those mailing lists. John froze. He had just quoted Satoshi, but Beck didn't respond by talking about Satoshi in the third person. He automatically shifted into the first person. I sure talked a lot, as if the quote belonged to him. Sitting in that hotel room, John felt a chill. For about 2 or 3 seconds, the man sitting across from him wasn't Adam Beck. It was Satoshi Nakamoto. The mask had slipped. Beck realized it immediately, pulled the mask back up, and politely repeated, I am not Satoshi. But John had seen it. That is where the 99.5% comes from. It's not just data. It's a veteran investigator watching the mask drop in real time. The remaining 0.5%, that's the fact that the only person who can confirm it 100% will take the secret to his grave. So why keep the secret? If the evidence is this damning, why wouldn't Beck just admit it? I personally think there are 3 reasons, and each is heavier than the last. Firstly, as I mentioned, Satoshi has a wallet with roughly $78 billion worth of Bitcoin. But in crypto, there is no bank vault, no FBI protection. The money is secured entirely by a string of passwords inside one man's head. If the world definitely knows Adam Beck is Satoshi, he instantly becomes the biggest target for every kidnapper and cartel on Earth. In the crypto world, this is a very real threat known as a range attack. where criminals break into your house and a pipe wrench and beat you until you hand over the passwords. If Beck confesses, his life, his family's lives are forever changed. Secondly, the legal nightmare. Adam Beck runs a massive Bitcoin company called Blockstream, which has been prepping to go public. The SEC has strict rules. If you take a company public, you must disclose all major assets and financial liabilities. Does holding $78 billion in untraceable currency count? Absolutely. But Beck hasn't mentioned a word of it on any legal filings. If he is Satoshi, he isn't just secretly rich. He's potentially committing massive securities fraud. That means prison time. And lastly, this is the most poetic reason. The entire value proposition of Bitcoin rests on one single concept. It has no leader, no CEO, no government. It is decentralized. It belongs to everyone. The most famous rallying cry in the crypto community is "We are all Satoshi." Satoshi is a spirit, a myth of decentralization. If a British guy in glasses steps up to a microphone and says, "Yeah, it was me, and that $78 billion is mine," the myth instantly dies. Bitcoin goes from being a universal technological miracle to just being Adam Beck's tech startup. The halo vanishes. The mask cannot be removed. So to wrap this up, I want to leave you with a final thought. As John Carreyrou was leaving that hotel room in El Salvador, Beck made one last, seemingly offhand comment. John didn't think much of it at that time, but the more he thought about it back in New York, the heavier it felt. Beck said, "I suspect the only way the world will ever truly know who Satoshi the very first time. Only then will we know for sure if John was right."